The day had started like any other, but Daniel Harper had no idea how much one small decision would change his life by the time the sun set. Dad were out of Cal again. His 8-year-old son Liam called from the kitchen holding up an empty box as if it were evidence of a crime. Daniel ran a hand through his messy brown hair and sighed. His old pickup truck was acting up again, and the bills were piling higher than ever. He'd been working every off job he could find since losing his full-time position at the factory 6 months ago. The savings were gone, the fridge was nearly empty, and the landlord had just given him a friendly reminder about the overdue rent. "All right, buddy," Daniel said, forcing a smile. "I'll grab some groceries after I drop you off at school, but you're having toast today." "Okay." Liam scrunched up his face but didn't argue. He was a good kid, sharp, kind, and far too standing for his age. Daniel hated that his son had to grow up seeing him struggle like this. After dropping Liam off at school, Daniel stopped by the grocery store. His wallet felt painfully light as he calculated every item in his cart: bread, milk, eggs, just the basics. He was heading back to his truck when he noticed a little girl sitting on the curb near the parking lot entrance. She couldn't have been older than 6, with blonde pigtails and a pink backpack that looked oversized against her tiny frame. She was crying softly, her face buried in her hands. Daniel hesitated. He had his own problems to deal with, and the last thing he needed was to get caught up in someone else's drama. But as he slid into the driver's seat, he couldn't shake the image of her tear-streaked face. "Come on, Danny," he muttered to himself. What if that were Liam? He stepped out of the truck and approached her cautiously. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said gently, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The girl sniffled and looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. "I can't find my mommy," she stammered. Daniel's heart clenched. "What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered. "All right, Emma," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Do you know your mom's phone number, or where she might be?" Emma nodded and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. It had a phone number scribbled on it, along with an address. Daniel pulled out his old flip phone and dialed the number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. He tried again, but no luck. "Okay," he said, trying to reassure both her and himself. "Let's get you home. I'll drive you there, and we'll find your mom together." "Sound good?" Emma nodded, her tears slowing but not entirely gone. He opened the passenger door of his truck and helped her climb in, making sure she was buckled up before pulling out of the parking lot. The address wasn't far, about 10 minutes away, but Daniel couldn't help worrying. What kind of mother would lose track of a little girl like this? As they drove, Emma started to relax. "You're nice," she said softly, her small voice cutting through the hum of the engine. Daniel glanced at her and smiled. "Well, you're pretty brave for a kid. You're going to be just fine." Okay. When they arrived at the address, it was a modest but well-kept house in a quiet neighborhood. Before Daniel could even knock on the door, a woman came rushing out, her face pale and panicked. "Emma," she cried, scooping the little girl into her arms. "Mommy," Emma sobbed, clinging to her. The woman looked up at Daniel, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling. "I was frantic. I didn't even realize she wasn't with me until I got home from the store. I was about to call the police." "It's all right," Daniel said, holding up his hands. "I'm just glad she's safe." The woman introduced herself as Rachel Bennett and explained that Emma had wandered off while she was loading groceries into her car. "I don't know how I missed her," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't thank you enough for bringing her back." "It's no trouble," Daniel said, though it had been a bit of a detour in his already hectic day. Rachel insisted on giving him something as a thank you, but Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do it for a reward," he said, Simply, well, at least let me get your name. She said, I'd like to send you a thank you card or something. Daniel Harper, he said. Rachel smiled warmly. Thank you, Daniel, you're a good man. As he drove away, Daniel couldn't help feeling a small sense of pride. For the first time in a while, he felt like he'd done something right when he picked up Liam from school. Later that day, his son immediately noticed the change in his mood. You look happy, Dad, Liam said, grinning. Yeah, I guess I am, Daniel replied. Sometimes doing the right thing just makes you feel good, you know. Liam nodded, though he was more focused on the bag of groceries in the back seat. Did you get cereal? Daniel laughed. Yes, I got cereal. It wasn't much, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like things might just be looking up. The next day started quietly enough. Daniel was up before the sun, sipping a cup of instant coffee while Liam slept soundly in the next room. He was already thinking about how to stretch the last bit of cash in his wallet until his next odd job came through. Maybe he'd take on another yard cleanup or patch a neighbor's fence. By the time Liam was awake and dressed, Daniel had already packed his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple. It wasn't much, but Liam didn't complain. Ready to go, champ? Daniel asked, tousling his son's hair. Yeah, Liam said with a grin, grabbing his backpack. The two of them piled into the old pickup truck, its engine coughing stubbornly before finally roaring to life. Daniel dropped Liam off at school, giving him an encouraging thumbs up as he ran toward the building. Have a good day, bud, he called. Liam turned and waved before disappearing inside. Daniel had just started to head back home when he noticed a sleek black luxury car pulling into his driveway. It was the kind of car he'd only ever seen in magazines, shiny, polished, and completely out of place in their modest neighborhood. He frowned, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. What in the world? Pulling up to his house, Daniel parked on the street and stepped out of the truck cautiously. The car's driver side door opened and a well-dressed man in his late 40s stepped out. He wore a tailored suit and had the kind of confident air that only came with money and success. Mr. Harper, the man asked, his tone polite but firm. Daniel blinked. Yeah, that's me. Can I help you? The man smiled and extended a hand. I'm James Bennett. My wife Rachel told me what you did for our daughter Emma yesterday. I wanted to stop by and thank you personally. Daniel shook his hand, still trying to process what was happening. Oh, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Bennett. Really, it was no big deal. I just wanted to make sure she got home safe. James chuckled lightly. No big deal. You went out of your way to help a scared little girl, a complete stranger. That's more than most people would do these days. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of his neck. Well, I just did what I'd hope someone would do for my son if he were in the same situation. James nodded, his expression softening. That says a lot about your character, Mr. Harper. At that moment, the passenger door of the car opened and Rachel stepped out, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Emma was with her, clutching her mother's hand and smiling shyly. Hi, Mr. Harper, Emma called out, waving enthusiastically. Hey, Emma, Daniel said, smiling. Rachel walked over, the flowers in hand. Daniel, I know you said you didn't want a reward yesterday, but we couldn't let your kindness go unacknowledged. These are for you. She handed him the bouquet and Daniel took it, feeling a little embarrassed but grateful. Thank you, that's really kind of you. There's more, James added. If you have a moment, I'd like to talk to you about something. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure where this was going, but he nodded. Sure, come on inside. The Bennetts followed him into the small, tidy house. It wasn't much, but Daniel tried to keep it clean and welcoming for Liam's sake. Rachel and Emma sat on the couch while James stood by the kitchen counter looking around with a thoughtful Expression nice place you've got here, James, said Daniel chuckled it's home for. Now James nodded then cleared his throat. Daniel Rachel mentioned that you're between jobs right. Now Daniel froze he hadn't expected that to come up but he nodded slowly yeah. Times have been a little tough lately. I'm doing what I can to make ends meet. James exchanged a glance with Rachel before turning back to Daniel. I run a construction company Bennett Developments. We're always looking for hard-working people with good values and from what I can see you'd be a perfect fit. Daniel's eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? I am. James confirmed it's not charity. Daniel, you'd be earning every penny but I recognize good people when I see them and I'd like to give you a chance. For a moment Daniel didn't know what to say. He felt a lump pump in his throat and had to swallow hard before speaking. I don't know what to say. Thank you, this means everything to me and my son. James smiled warmly. You've already said enough, just show up on Monday morning ready to work. Rachel stood and placed a gentle hand on Daniel's arm. You deserve this, Daniel, and if there's anything else we can do to help, please don't hesitate to ask. Emma tugged on Daniel's sleeve, grinning up at him. Thank you for helping me, Mr. Harper. Daniel crouched down to her level and smiled. You're welcome, Emma. You're a special kid and I'm glad I was there to help. The Bennetts stayed for a little while longer, chatting and getting to know Daniel better. By the time they left, Daniel felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders as he watched their car drive away. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. When Liam came home from school that afternoon, Daniel couldn't wait to tell him the news. Hey, bud, he said, ruffling Liam's hair. Guess what? I got a new job. Liam's face lit up. Really? That's awesome, Dad. Yeah, Daniel said, pulling his son into a hug. Things are going to get better, I promise. And for the first time in a long time he believed it. Monday morning arrived with a crisp chill in the air, and Daniel woke up before his alarm. The first day at a new job always carried a mix of excitement and nerves, but for him it was more than that. It was the possibility of a fresh start. He made a quick breakfast for Liam, packing an extra sandwich for his son's lunch before walking him to the school bus stop. Good luck today, Dad, Liam said with a smile as the bus pulled up. Thanks, bud. You too, Daniel replied, giving him a playful salute. The drive to Bennett Developments was quiet, giving Daniel time to think. James Bennett had asked him to report to one of their construction sites on the edge of town. Daniel had spent years working with his hands, fixing things, building what he could, but this was his first time stepping into a professional construction company. He wasn't sure what to expect when he arrived. James himself was waiting at the site, dressed more casually than before but still exuding confidence. Morning, Daniel, James called out, extending a hand. Morning, Daniel said, shaking it firmly. James introduced him to the foreman, a burly man named Carl with a salt and pepper beard who seemed skeptical at first. This the guy? Carl asked, looking Daniel up and down. The guy, James said with a smile. Give him a fair chance. I have a feeling he'll impress you. Carl grunted but nodded. All right, then let's get to work. The day was physically demanding, but Daniel thrived in the challenge. He hauled materials, measured beams, and followed every instruction Carl threw his way. By lunch, the foreman's skepticism had softened. You've done this kind of work before, Carl said as they sat on overturned crates eating their sandwiches a little. Daniel admitted not on the scale, though. Well, you're a quick learner, I'll give you that, Carl said with a nod of approval. By the time the workday ended, Daniel was exhausted but proud. He wiped the sweat from his brow and couldn't help but smile as he climbed back into his truck. It wasn't just a job, it was a step toward stability for him and Liam over the next few weeks. Daniel settled into his role at Bennett. Developments he worked hard arriving early and leaving late and slowly began earning the respect of his co-workers. James checked in occasionally, always offering encouragement but never hovering. One Friday afternoon as the crew was wrapping up for the day, James pulled Daniel aside. "You've been doing great, Daniel," James said. "Better than I even expected." "Thanks," Daniel replied, a little embarrassed by the praise. "I'd like you to stop by the office on Monday," James continued. "There's something I want to discuss with you." Daniel nodded, curious but not wanting to read too much into it. "Sure, I'll be there that weekend." Daniel spent time with Liam, taking him to the park and helping him with a school project. It was a simple life, but for the first time in months it felt manageable. When Monday morning came, Daniel reported to the Bennett Development's office as requested. The receptionist led him to James's office, where Rachel was also waiting. "Good to see you, Daniel," Rachel said warmly. "Good to see you too," Daniel replied, a little surprised to find her there. James gestured for him to sit, and Daniel complied, feeling slightly out of place in the sleek, modern office. "I'll get straight to the point," James said. "Rachel and I have been talking, and we've decided we want to do more for you." Daniel frowned, slightly unsure what he meant. "You've already done plenty by giving me this job. I don't want to seem ungrateful, but you've earned everything you have here." James interrupted. "This isn't about charity, it's about recognizing someone who went out of their way to do something extraordinary." Rachel leaned forward, her expression sincere. "Daniel, when you found Emma, you didn't just help a lost child. You gave us back a piece of our lives. That kind of kindness doesn't come around often. We want to pay it forward." James reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk to Daniel. "What's this?" Daniel asked, hesitating to pick it up. "Open it," James said with slightly trembling hands. Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $10,000. His breath caught, and for a moment he couldn't speak. "This is too much," he finally managed to say. "It's not," Rachel said firmly. "You've worked hard for us, and this is our way of saying thank you, not just for Emma, but for being the kind of person who makes the world a better place." James smiled. "Use it however you see fit. Pay off some bills, get a more reliable truck, or save it for Liam's future. It's yours, no strings attached." Daniel's eyes stung as he fought back tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You already have," James replied as Daniel left the office that day. The envelope tucked safely in his jacket, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the first time in a long time. The future didn't seem so uncertain. When he picked up Liam from school that afternoon, his son noticed the change in his expression. "Good day at work?" Liam asked, climbing into the truck. "The best," Daniel said with a smile. "What happened?" Liam pressed. "I'll tell you over dinner," Daniel replied, and as they drove home, Daniel couldn't help but feel that the best days were still ahead. Later that evening, after washing up the dinner dishes, Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, the envelope James and Rachel had given him still resting in front of him. It had been a long time since he had held anything close to $10,000, and the enormity of the gift hadn't fully sunk in yet. The check represented more than just money. It was a lifeline, an opportunity to finally get ahead instead of constant scrambling to catch up, but with it came a sense of responsibility. He wanted to use it wisely, to make the most of this unexpected blessing. "Dad, can I help?" Liam's voice pulled Daniel out of his thoughts. His son stood at the edge of the kitchen, holding the broom he'd been using to sweep the living room. Daniel chuckled. "You already helped by sweeping. That's one less thing for me to do." Liam grinned as he leaned the broom against the wall. "Are we going to get Pizza this weekend, you said. Maybe. Daniel smiled, ruffling Liam's hair. Yeah, I think we can swing that. You've been doing great in school. You deserve a treat. Liam's face lit up and he gave his dad a quick hug before running off to his room. Daniel watched him go, his heart full for all the struggles they'd faced. Liam had never once complained. That was part of why Daniel was so determined to make things better, not just for himself, but for his boy. The next morning Daniel got up early and started making a list of priorities. First he needed to pay off the overdue rent and make sure the roof over their heads was secure. Then he'd take care of the stack of bills that had been sitting on the counter for weeks. After that, maybe he'd look into fixing up the old truck or even putting some money aside for emergencies. But before he could get too far into his plans, his phone buzzed. It was message from James Bennett. Hope you're having a good day, Daniel. If you're free this weekend, Rachel and I would love to have you and Liam over for lunch. Let me know what works for you. Daniel smiled as he read the text. He hadn't expected James and Rachel to keep reaching out after everything they'd already done for him, but their kindness seemed genuine. He replied quickly, thanking them for the invitation and agreeing to Sunday afternoon. When Sunday arrived, Daniel and Liam made their way to the Bennett's home, a sprawling brick house. Liam's eyes widened as they pulled into the driveway. What, Dad, their house is huge. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, it is, beyond your best behavior. Okay, I will, Liam promised, practically bouncing with excitement. Rachel greeted them at the door with a warm smile, ushering them inside. Emma came running down the hallway, her pigtails bouncing as she threw her arms around Daniel. Hi, Mr. Harper, she said brightly. Hi, Liam. Liam grinned. Hi, Emma. The two kids disappeared into the living room together while Rachel led Daniel into the dining area where James was setting the table. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh baked bread filled the air, and Daniel couldn't help but feel a little out of place in such a beautiful home. Glad you could make it, James said, shaking Daniel's hand. Thanks for inviting us, Daniel replied. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. It's no trouble, Rachel said, waving off his concern. We just wanted to spend some time with you and Liam. You've been such a blessing to our family, Daniel. This is the least we can do. As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily. James and Rachel asked about Daniel's work at the construction site, and he shared some of the projects he'd been working on. They also asked about Liam, who was now happily playing with Emma in the next room. He's a great kid, James said. You've done a wonderful job raising him. Thanks, Daniel said, his voice tinged with emotion. He's my whole world. Rachel nodded. It's clear how much you love him, and he's lucky to have a dad who sets such a good example. After lunch, James pulled Daniel aside while the kids played outside, and Rachel cleaned up. I wanted to talk to you about something, James said, his tone serious but kind. Sure, Daniel said, curious. I've been thinking a lot about the kind of person you are. Hardworking, kind, selfless people like you are rare, Daniel, and I think you have a lot of potential. Daniel looked at him, unsure where this was going. I want to offer you something more than just a job, James continued. There's a management training program at Bennett, developments for employees who show leadership qualities. It's a big commitment, but I think you'd be a perfect candidate. What do you think? Daniel was stunned. Are you serious? Completely, James said. You've already proven yourself on the job site. This would be a chance to move up to build a real career. Daniel hesitated, the weight of the offer sinking in. I don't know, James. I've never done anything like that before. You can learn, James said firmly. I believe in you, Daniel, and I think you owe it to yourself and Liam to take this opportunity. Daniel thought about it for a long moment. He'd spent so much of his life just trying to survive, but maybe it Was time to start thinking about what came next. All right, he said finally, I'll do it. James smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. You won't regret it. When Daniel and Liam left the Bennett's house that afternoon, the future felt brighter than it had in years. Daniel had a steady job, a path forward, and people who believed in him. As they drove home, Liam asked, Did you have fun, Dad? I did, Daniel said, glancing at his son in the rearview mirror. And you know what, Liam, I think things are going to keep getting better for us. Liam grinned. Me too. And as the sun set behind them, casting a warm glow over the horizon, Daniel allowed himself to believe it. For the first time in a long time, he saw not just hope, but a future filled with possibilities.